Welcome back. I'm Jason Wally Waldron, the secret weapon behind owners, founders, and CEOs of blue collar and industrial companies who apply exitology to grow faster and maximize the value of their business. You're listening to the Exitology Unlock Your Profits, Unlock Your Potential show. And I am joined here today by Sean Hutchinson of Ready for Next Advisors, RFN. And we have been talking about creating lasting value even in a challenging economy. And Sean, we've talked a little bit about overcoming entrepreneur anxiety and business owner anxiety, and then we talked a little bit about how do we create sustained growth across the different generations. And frankly, folks, we scratched less than 1% of the surface of that particular item, and so I would absolutely encourage you to have a look at readyfornextadvisorygroup.com after you're done listening to this. But the next thing we were going to cover here, Sean, is transition options. How do we help these closely held businesses exit from an empowered place as opposed to a reactive place?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the most requested things that we do in our particular set of consulting options is what we call a transition options analysis. And it happens relatively early in the process because, it's kind of that begin with the end in mind. But if you don't really have a good idea of what the ends might be, really hard to create that pathway. And most of those that I've talked to over the years say, I really want to know more about my options and how they work. What are the pros? What are the cons? What are the mechanics?
Yeah, and generally speaking, what are those options that people have available?
Yeah, so there are 7 ways to get other than an IPO. There are 7 ways to exit a privately held business. So there are internals. The internals are partnership transfer, a family intergenerational transfer, management buyout, and some type of employee ownership, or a combination of those. We call those hybrid strategies, right? They're not mutually exclusive. In a lot of times they'll fit together pretty nicely. The externals are sell it to a third party. That can be a strategic party or a private equity financial group or a family office. Somebody who's got either a strategic or financial interest in owning that company. It can be a merger. It can be leave it in place, operate it, whatever that might look like. Recapitalizing the company in order keeping part of the equity and accepting a partial equity partner plus some capital. And then, of course, there's the feared, but sometimes, believe it or not, the best way to get out for some types of businesses that are asset heavy, an orderly liquidation, not a fire sale.
Right.
You see liquidations in companies that, like airlines.
Right.
They have no going concern value. They don't make much money, but they got a lot of assets. So that might be the way. That might be the way to do it.
Keyword is orderly, right?
Orderly, that's right. And you've got a lot of control over an orderly liquidation. And the internal options, you have a lot more control as an owner over timing, over confidentiality, over design. Who do you want to do it with? What's that look like? And the external options are very, very difficult. That's what I would say about them. Selling your business to a third party, 70 to 80% of the businesses that go to market with a good strategy for selling to a third party fail.
Wow.
So the failure rate is incredibly high. I don't know that we really have a handle yet on exactly why it's that high. It's probably a lot of different things that kind of come into play at any given time. But I always try to be honest with owners who say, well, selling to a third party is where I'm going to get the most money out of the deal. I'll get the most attractive, return. And I'll say, you're not wrong, but we're underestimating exactly how hard it is to do that. So a lot of owners feel when we take them through the analysis, we're looking at 4 dimensions. We're looking at fit, which is generally culture, values, things like that.
Okay.
We're looking at feasibility. Is it technically feasible to do it? Do they have the cash flows? So on and so forth. Is it likely given the present circumstances? Right. So it may be technically feasible, but you've got 4 shareholders that can't agree. That's not a likely, right?
Right.
And then degree of difficulty. Some are just harder to do than others, generally speaking. But when we do degree of difficulty, we're actually relating them to one another within the context of the business and the ownership itself. So it may be harder to do an ESOP, right? Employee stock ownership program than a management buyout in general. But in a given business, it might be easier to do an ESOP than a management buyout.
Yeah, and you haven't thrown out this word, but what's coming up for me is the idea of culture, right? Because if, for instance, using your partnership example there, if you have someone who is a very financially minded partner and they're, and they say, hey, look, positioning this business to sell, whether it's through strategic acquisition or private equity or whatever, that's what we need to do. And then if on the other hand, you have a partner that's way over on the other spectrum, which is the most important thing here is that this business is my family, you're going to be eons apart of how you're going to be able to set that business up for the eventual exit.
That's right. We're asking owners in many cases to weigh the relationship between liquidity and legacy. So into the example that you just used, you probably got one partner that's leaning more towards liquidity, and you've got another partner that's leaning towards legacy. We've had family businesses say legacy is not as important to us as liquidity.
Sure.
Right. We're even though we have the family intergenerational transfer option, we decided that money is going to count more for us as a family in the future than continuing to maintain and take the risk of running a private business. Remember, a private security of this kind is really, really black box. It is mega illiquid. When we talk about liquidity, right, we're talking about investable assets, easy to monetize. When we talk about real estate, yes, it's illiquid, but there's a market for real estate. There's financing for it. It's not that hard. Then you have the private security business, which is mega illiquid and very hard to monetize without a huge amount of preparation. And that's why value acceleration, value growth is a really important process to go through, because it takes what's essentially a black box and turns it blue. At least we have some view into it. But when we're dealing with a security that's this difficult, having options is one of the ways that you manage the risk of not being able to get out, because you have multiple pathways that you can pursue.
And I think you just touched on something that's so interesting. I love the idea of the tension between liquidity and legacy, because I literally was having a discussion with a business owner yesterday, and that was the tension between the two owners, and they're in growth mode. They're nowhere close to exit, or at least they don't think they are. But it's something that comes up at all phases of the game. And what I love about what you just touched on with value acceleration methodology is taking this black box and going through it. It's a process, right? And it's a proven process. And they're, and I think maybe it'd be helpful to speak to what does that look like as somebody goes through that, and probably even more specifically, how do they start to become empowered to choose that exit?
Yeah. So value acceleration, is within the value acceleration methodology that we're taught as certified exit planning advisors, right? So we actually do have a framework for this, and it's an agile framework, so you can innovate within it. We do value acceleration, for instance, probably differently, but related to the way that exitology does it.
Exactly.
Right? We're all in the same area. We think there are 7 value domains that are really, really important to make improvements in a sequence. So culture comes first, a culture of value acceleration. Then you have to reduce risk. Then you have to build a strategy. Then you have to get really good at operating your business, waste out, productivity increase. Then you have to sell better, sell more effectively, sell more efficiently, which is related to the marketing strategy. Then you need to be really good at investing money and getting a return, being very clear on why. And then you need to have leadership wrapped around all of that. Those are the 7 value domains. We're going to walk an owner through those things in a value accelerator, ideally over probably a 3, 4, 5 year period, because it takes time to do it and then season it, and then you move on to the next thing. It's intensive, right? It's really, really intensive work. It's yes, and it's an additive process. We are not. I don't like you. People may have heard the term "ugly baby," right? Your baby's ugly. I don't like it. I don't like it. I push back against it, because I think that there's beauty in every business. Nobody's built a 35 or 40-year-old business that's ugly.
Right.
It's got flaws. There are things that we can do if we focus on building value in addition to building revenue and profit. Right. So it's important to kind of have that. My business is not just a source of income. It's actually an investment asset, and I have to treat it that way. I expect a return.
I love so much of what you just said there, especially we're very fond of saying, hey, ultimately hold us to a transferable value metric.
Yeah.
But oh, by the way, we're going to hold you to that too. And that's one of the ways that we get alignment. When if you see us at a golf course, for instance, you'll see us in our golf shirts, and it literally is on our sleeve. It says, "Unlock your profits, unlock your potential," because if we can unlock that transferable value through profits, through value, and taking them through the value acceleration, to your point, now the owner is informed and empowered. And
that's right.
Have you seen in your practice where kind of going back to that idea, and I'm not huge on the your baby's ugly thing either, because I've used those terms before, and usually I end up in a fight with the business owner. And I don't like that.
You want to be. That's not where you want to be.
And so, but I'm curious, have you seen a situation where you start to take someone through this process, and after they kind of settle into it, that they fall in love with the business again?
Absolutely. People often the owner will come in, especially if they've been doing 35 or 40 years, that entrepreneurial fire that they had on day one, right? And they're excited, and they went into business for themselves, understanding the risk, understanding how exciting that is, taking responsibility for their future.
Yep.
And then over time, they might get beaten down. They've got successes, they got failures, but they've aged too. We know what happens when we age, right? We don't think the same way. Our bodies don't hold up. But I've seen people who have come in. Remember, at the end of the value acceleration methodology, there's a choice to be made: keep it or sell it.
That's right.
Both choices are legitimate. It is not a fail for someone to get to the end and say, you know what, this is a really good business now. I'm making more money. I'm seeing cash flow. I see growth opportunities. Right. Maybe I need to go out and buy rather than sell. I'm going to build something even better. And here's why. I'm treating it as an investment asset, but also I've now maybe shifted my perspective to, I can create an asset that'll be really good for the next generation of my family, or I'm going to create an asset that rewards my employees, rewards my management team. That's what we're after. And that fire is important.
That's really great. So thanks for sharing all this, because I think, anyone who has just heard this, you see, it's really about all of the optionality that can be created for you as the business owner. Right. Okay, we'll be back after a short break here. You are listening to the Exitology Unlock Your Profits, Unlock Your Potential show on the International Business Growth Radio Network.